Well, hello and welcome to the Imago Nutrition Podcast. I'm Danielle Glesney and I am a dietitian. Some people call dietitian nutritionist, which just is RDN or RD. And I am with you today, and we are going to talk about a really interesting topic to me, and I think a very important one. So, with the Imago Nutrition Podcast, we want to give you practical nutrition strategies to help you and your family flourish. And today, I would like to talk about plant foods and their importance on health. I also want to simply describe how organisms in our body work together as a whole. And some information today is going to be kind of hard to explain, so I'm going to do my best. And rather than focusing on the details of how our body works, I'll try to focus on main points. So, to give you those practical nutrition strategies to help you and your family flourish. If you have a topic that you would like us to discuss on this podcast, please feel free to fill out the 2-second form on our website, Imago Nutrition, IMAGO nutrition.com/podcast. And we would love to do some research for you and answer your questions, or just give you a topic overview and how it is important for your health. So with that, you have probably heard, if you've been following us for any time, we have 4 pillars that we talk about as a visual. Pillars can be like a visual of how you build a house or a foundation. And these are, your pillars for good health. So a foundation for good health. And there's 4 total, and 3 out of the 4 are plant-based. And so, again, these are just helpful to help you choose those nutrient-dense foods, those foods that provide the most benefit to your body most often. So that's what those 4 pillars are designed to do. So the 3 pillars that we're going to focus on today are the fruits and veggies, whole grains, nuts, and seeds. So fruits and veggies do include starchy vegetables such as potatoes, legumes, and that would be like beans and lentils. So that is the topic that we're going to focus on, and how we're going to do that is we're going to look at some really cool research on the gut and brain axis. So the reason I wanted to do this podcast episode on this topic is the American Gut Project, which we'll talk about in a minute, gave a recommendation that really impacts how we should eat, and which also impacts meal planning and prepping. So that's why I wanted to dive into this. But first, let's get our bearings. Microbiome is a group of microorganisms in and on a host, including their genetic material. So the host is us, okay? And the genetic material of the microbiome is actually enormous. It is 150 times greater than the human genome, which means there are a lot of microorganisms in you and on you. So it's also in your skin or on your skin. So this huge population we're talking about reminds me of a movie I watched with my kids this weekend. And so the characters in the movie are trying to save this crop that provides electricity for their town. And they find where the crop's root system meets. And it is in a world filled with these really unique creatures that all interact with each other. So these unique creatures visually looked a lot like bacteria in a whole variety. Like when you think of bacteria, sometimes it could just be like a picture of one, molecular looking thing, but they are so many different kinds of bacteria, and they all interact with each other. And they all need each other. So if one's not doing well, it's not going to support the other very well, etc. So that is really similar. That picture in the movie of all these different types of microorganisms and how they communicate to each other and need each other is very similar to our microbiome. So many creatures are living inside of you, and they communicate with each other, and we need them to function well. So the gut and brain axis is basically just how the gut and the brain communicate, and they do it both directions. So it's bidirectional communication between the central and enteric nervous system. So enteric nervous system is just the enormous number of neurons that make up your gastrointestinal tract or your stomach, all the way, all those organs involved in your gastrointestinal tract. So there are actually possibly more neurons in the human gut than in the entire spinal cord. So that's just giving you another picture of how important our gut is. And there are lots of ways that the gut and brain talk. So there's multiple different pathways. The gut and brain the gut brain axis allows the brain to influence functions in the gut, such as immune cells, epithelia cells, and enteric neurons and smooth muscle cells. And then the same is true of the opposite direction. So the gut influences the functions in the brain. So one of the pathways of communication is through the vagus nerve. And so think about the vagus nerve as just a nerve from the brain that is long and branching, just like a huge tree or root system. The vagal sensory neurons and spinal neurons carry information from the intestine to the brainstem. And this engages with the hypothalamus and limbic system, which is responsible for regulating emotions. So this is just one example. So one example of this communication is stress influences activity in the gut. So another, I don't know, this is maybe a little more personal for me. I don't know if it applies to anybody else, but I know that when I don't eat food that's really good and nourishing to my body, I feel it affects my emotions. It makes me crabby. So I don't know if that resonates with anyone. I don't know if it's backed by science, but again, stress influences the gut. So that's one example that we do know. So stress can cause all sorts of GI discomfort, from diarrhea to constipation to bloating, and then in turn, anxiety and stress about all these uncomfortable symptoms. So that's just kind of my interpretation of what I see with clients, and how the brain and the gut kind of have these communications in this pathway here. So another pathway of communication is through byproducts produced by those microbes. And so the microbes produce what's called short chain fatty acids, and this stimulates the sympathetic nervous system and mucosal serotonin release. And this means that microbes influence memory and learning processes in the brain. So again, there are many other pathways in which the gut and brain interact. We just talked about two of them. But I just wanted to go through a quick little example of how long ago, actually, this kind of evidence was coming about. So more than 20 years ago, was the observation of a dramatic improvement in patients with hepatic encephalopathy. That's hard to say. And so when I worked in the hospital, I would see a patient with hepatic encephalopathy, and it creates an altered level of consciousness. So their brain is not functioning well. They're very confused. And this is hepatic encephalopathy is just a word describing the confusion that happens. And it's what happens because of liver damage, not being able to remove toxins in the blood. So they found that treating the gut with oral antibiotics allowed for improvement in brain function. So that was one, example more than 20 years ago of how the gut and the brain are connected. So now emerging data supports the role of microbiota influencing anxiety and depression, and even autism. So disruption or dyssymbiosis is just a disruption or imbalance in the microbiome. And in autistic patients, their specific microbiota alterations can change based on the severity of their disease. So there's just a lot of evidence. Another one is functional gastrointestinal disorders are highly associated with mood disorders. So, for example, this disruption occurring in the gut-brain axis determines changes in intestinal motility, secretion, causes a visceral hypersensitivity, and leads to cellular alterations of the enteroendocrine and immune system. So some of those just functional just gastrointestinal disorders are something like IBS. So that is kind of where you see that imbalance or disruption. So in these few examples, basically, I'm just going to sum it up. The gut influences the brain, and the brain influences the gut. So the American Gut Project is a team of leading researchers studying how the gut flourishes. So basically, anyone can participate. They send in samples, and the team of researchers look at the genetic makeup of those samples and determine how many different microorganisms are in the gut based on those samples. And what they found is first of all, they recommend 30 different plant foods per week based on what they found from these samples. So there was a larger diverse population from people that were able to eat 30 different plant foods per week than those that ate less. So the research also showed that people who hit that 30 mark and more or had more bacteria that produce something called short chain fatty acids. Okay, so we already know that the short chain fatty acids is one of the pathways of communications, but what are the benefits of these byproducts? So I'm just going to give you a quick list of the benefits of those short chain fatty acids that are produced by those good bacteria in your gut. So they are helpful for digestive health, of course. So it improves inflammatory bowel disease, reduces diarrhea. It's also important for reducing disease risk, such as colon cancer risk, or supporting heart health. These fatty acids have a protective effect of cardiovascular health. They are also important for metabolic processes. So blood sugar control and prevention of diabetes, healthy weight management. They can play a role. The short chain fatty acids can play a role in healthy weight management. And some other benefits would be anti-inflammatory properties, immune regulation, neuroprotective. So they're protecting our nervous system. And the list goes on. So those are just a few of those short chain fatty acid benefits. So the more diverse your gut is, the better overall health you will get. So what counts for the 30 plant foods per week? Okay, well, obviously fruits and vegetables count, and each variety counts as one. So apples would be one, and oranges would be one. Legumes, again, beans like black beans, cannellini beans, kidney beans, chickpeas, and red lentils and green lentils. Okay, each variety again counts as one. Then you have like grains such as oats, buckwheat, millet, wheat, brown rice. And then one thing to be take note of is white pasta or white rice are not included because the industrial process remove the whole grain benefits. So those do not count, but the whole grains do. Then you also have nuts and seeds, So you have almonds and hazelnuts, sunflower seeds, pumpkin seeds, cashews, peanuts would be more of a legume. And then we have herbs and spices. They obviously count not dried herbs and spices. If you want to be really technical here, it says that actually those fresh herbs and spices, because we have such a small amount, it really just counts as 1/4. But that is really particular. If you don't want to go tracking that to the T, that detailed, that's totally fine. If you just want to count, fresh basil, count it as one, because obviously can't eat enormous amount of it. So first step I would recommend is to track. So how many different plant foods do you have in a day, and how many different plant foods would that add up to in a week? So I just made a quick list of all the different plant foods that I think I eat in 1 week, and just to see how many would add up, and to give you an example of either how quickly or how hard it might be, depending on the person and how you cook throughout the week. And so here is my list. So apples, bananas, oranges, strawberries, blueberries, grapes, kiwi, pears, carrots, celery, romaine, bell peppers, spinach, tomatoes, cauliflower, broccoli, green beans, beets, kale, oats, sweet potatoes, butternut squash, brown rice, quinoa, almonds, peanut butter, sunflower seeds, avocados, chickpeas, black beans, garlic, onions. And then I have recently, started with fresh herbs. So I have a basil plant in my house, a flat leaf parsley, rosemary, and thyme. So I have those 4 as well. And I'm trying to include those weekly. I think I at least get one of those weekly. But again, so you can see, for example, maybe I don't have kale every week. And so maybe a different vegetable that I maybe forgot to mention would take that place. So yeah, just kind of track would be my first recommendation, to see how many you get routinely in the week. And then the second step would to slowly increase your variety. So if you eat an apple a day, you're going to keep the doctor away, right? But consider instead to buy a variety of foods. So if you're cooking or eating, just 1 or 2 people in the house, then you're going to need to buy kind of smaller portions so they don't go bad. Also think about relying on those frozen for the fruit that is not in season. But so maybe consider buying 1 apple, 1 orange, 2 kiwis, some grapes, different varieties of berries, all to count as your fruit throughout the week. And so again, the other benefit of the frozen is it won't go bad on you. So I know it's more challenging for those wanting to eat fruits and vegetables when you have less in your household, to help with preventing it to go bad. But again, utilizing those frozen, they are frozen at the peak of ripeness. So they're still going to give you so many benefits as the fresh, or not even, maybe even more, because again, they're not processed, such as a can. So you're going to get just the same amount of benefits of fresh or frozen. And then if you're eating in a household with lots of members, then you could maybe buy a whole bag of apples, a whole bag of oranges, what have you. Because the more you have, and the more visible it is, the more you will eat. Third step would be to increase the frequency of the plant food throughout the day. So the idea behind this is the more frequent you put it in your meal, the more in the meals, the more you will have throughout the week. So, for example, try to have 1 serving of fruit for breakfast, 1 whole grain or nut or seed, or maybe a starchy vegetable, and 1 serving of maybe a non-starchy vegetable for breakfast. Maybe for lunch, you have, again, 1 fruit, 1 whole grain, nuts or seed, and 2 veggies for lunch. And then maybe for dinner, you have 2 servings of veggies, 1 whole grain, nut or seed, and maybe fruit for dessert. So I just thought of writing a quick menu to give you an example. So let's just say you have a breakfast quesadilla. So you have white beans in there, gives that creamy texture of cheese. Maybe you have spinach, garlic, and a whole grain tortilla. And then you have fruit with that. So you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 just from breakfast. So this is like a stellar menu, by the way. I really tried to make sure I described it well for you to show you how you could really get, you know, 4 essentially in one breakfast quesadilla. So again, maybe you're only going to have the white beans and the spinach in your breakfast quesadilla, but again, you have the whole grain tortilla, hopefully, and there you get 3. So the garlic, kind of a bonus there. And then for maybe lunch, you have a salad. Maybe the salad has spinach, peppers, tomatoes, romaine, olives, and maybe some toasted nuts on top with fruit. Okay, so again, you have spinach, peppers, tomatoes, romaine, olives, toasted nuts, and fruit. That equals 7. And then for dinner, you have maybe chicken, sweet potato, and Brussels sprouts. So there's 2 more, the sweet potatoes and Brussels sprouts. So that is one day of 14. So again, that is a stellar day. Not saying that that's where you have to start. Most certainly not. I want you to slowly add these things back in. 1, because they're high in fiber, and if you add them in too quickly, that can cause some GI discomfort. And 2, if you add them in more gradually, it's going to be more sustainable. So I just wanted to, again, have this episode because I think it's a little different than some people plan when they're planning their meals. So some people have a meal prep mindset of making the same meal, to have multiple times a week. So it saves some time, right? If you make a ton of chicken and a ton of broccoli and a ton of brown rice, but you are not obviously going to reach these goals if we're eating, just one vegetable, multiple times a week. So we really want to try to have, broccoli once a week, green beans once a week, carrots and beets once a week, butternut squash once a week. So again, just variety is key. So I really hope you have found this episode helpful. And if you have, please share with a friend, review, subscribe, so that we can help more people just like you. So thank you. Have a great day. And thank you for Happy Pill for our theme song, Thinking About Food.